Welcome to the People Performance Podcast, where we discuss all things people performance. The People Performance Podcast is made up of 3 series. First up, we have the Leader Lounge episodes with founder of T2, Martin Johnson. Then we have the guest interview episodes. And finally, we have our performance episodes delivered by our very own T2 consultants. If you've listened to our podcast and you want to get in touch and find out a little bit more about what we do or how we can help and support you, reach out via help@trans2performance.com. You can stream and listen to our podcast on all available platforms. So for now, sit back, tune in and enjoy the People Performance Podcast.
Coming up on this episode.
It's not just the skills. It's not just the best person for the job.
That's fascinating because what you do is you then get into the standardised language of how you can communicate these things out, right?
I guess looking at the role alignment allows you to make a brave decision, doesn't it? You've got to really sit in it and think, adapt. So can you find energy in this new role?
Hello and welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, James Cooper.
And me, Tracy Roberts.
So today we are delving into something that we speak about on a regular basis with a lot of the people that we work with, Tracy. So it is really, the top and bottom of it is role alignment.
Yeah.
Obviously with yourself, Tracy, you've been in a lot of the situations in T2 environments and outside of T2 environments in past workings and different tenures in different organisations. So you have been privy to high performance and some testing challenging environments as well. So what we're going to do, everybody that's listening and watching, we're going to look at role alignment. So into more detail with Tracy Roberts.
Thank you. I think it's a good thing to sort of talk about because a lot of the conversations we have, I'm going to kind of throw it out there and say it covers all of our touch points here at T2. So if you've been in to do coaching with us, if you've been in a dynamics workshop, if you've been in learning about leadership and the changes, etc., that you have to go through to become successful at that, I think role alignment pops up more than you'd think. Although the narrative isn't let's look at role alignment, but there's so many different variations. And I guess what I've put down here is it's the sweet spot where you fundamentally align wholeheartedly with what you do every day. So some people will sort of associate role alignment with skills a little bit. They'll think, right, I'm doing a job because I'm right to do the job because I've learned what I need to learn and I'm extremely good at it. But the reality of it is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think even from what the actual real meaning of role alignment is, you've obviously gone into quite a lot of detail there around what it actually is. But I think for some people, they think it's just, well, I'm the best person for this job, or, well, okay, you might think you are, but is there anything else that could guide us or help us to understand why somebody might be the right person for the job?
And I guess that's probably where we're going to take this today is like what it feels like when you are aligned and when you're misaligned, because I think that's a really good question for people to start asking themselves today, and short term, long term, and we'll get there. We'll get there today. But there's lots of little things that kind of line up to make sure that you're considering your role alignment. Now, we're really lucky here because we have a whole heap of tools that we use. Some of the listeners and viewers won't be privy to some of the tools we use, but we will mention some of them today because they are good indicators if you've gone through that process with us at T2. But role alignment, in terms of a check on yourself, is something you can do quite easily. So we're going to just draw your attention to some of this stuff today. I think what's really important to mention is it's not just the skills. It's not just the best person for the job. It's something around your inherent nature. So the natural ways that you think and behave, so your attributes. So the things that are natural to you, the things that actually energize you, what you can tap into regularly. So for instance, some people can be, really stoked by creativity as an example. Yeah. And that's something that's natural. A lot of people say, it's just something that lives within me. And I think if you can bring that out as often as possible and you get a lot of energy from that, then that's something to consider. That's something that kind of, I guess, leans into what your role alignment could look like in terms of bringing out the best in you. We often talk about our unconscious motivator. So these are the things, are the why behind your actions. So they kind of line up with your attributes a little bit. But this can be, you know, the way you're built, what you're, I guess, to all intents and purposes, put on this planet to do. You know, so if you're like me and you're strong and self-reliant, needed and appreciated, they're the two things that motivate me. Anything that lines up with allowing me to be that person is, you know, going to put me in a good place to feel like my role alignment is there. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a while, because you can measure that, can't you? You can actually say, am I lining up with my value system?
Yeah.
And that's a big thing to think about, isn't it? Because if your value system clashes with your organisation's, that's maybe where we sometimes feel some rocky road for individuals.
Yeah, and I think I don't know about you, Tracy, and it's probably, we're going to go into much deeper detail than just a job description, and whether somebody that's listening or watching to this now and thinking, that job, based on the job description, that sounds, I'd really enjoy that. And then when they get into the crux of it, they end up going, I've made a little bit of a mistake here. But I think where does that come from, and what are some of the tools that we use? It sounds like the alignment is to the whole person and the whole role, rather than it just being, oh, I like that little bit of this job, I don't like this bit of that job. Okay, what does that mean?
And that's a key thing to consider within role alignment. You're going to have things that are short and long term, right? So you're going to, and we'll get to that in a moment when we're talking about evolving needs of the business, because this is the thing, you can have all your attributes being stoked, so the things that you really love to, you know, activate and work within your genius, that could all be working for you in that particular job at that time. Most of your value system is being, it's not challenged. You're actually working in a way you'd like to work. The company values align with yours on the whole. And that puts you in a strong position. But you've got to remember, you're in most organizations, you are absolutely constantly evolving at the mercy of the business. So you can have your role alignment feel really strong and go through a period of change, and all of a sudden so many factors come in that change, and it feels like you feel out of kilt. That's the best way to explain it. You think, what's going on for me here? Like, I'm in a job here that felt so good for me, and all of a sudden there's just something doesn't feel quite right to me. And that's why a role alignment exercise is really important, because it's usually not one thing. It can be a number of things. It can be the way you do your work, your value system being questioned, your work-life balance feeling different to what you're used to, because that can play a massive part. Learning and development opportunities. So are you still learning, relearning, unlearning, all those things in your role? And if you're someone who really needs that, if you're stagnant, that can cause a few fractures within, you know, how you feel about that job. Development opportunities. All of a sudden, the gateways could close for your development or your advancement, and all of a sudden the future doesn't seem so bright, you know, and that's clashing with, you know, your role alignment, because you're feeling stuck, if that makes sense. And then culture plays a massive part, you know. So you can be doing, we've all been there, a job that can be long or short term, not feel as great to us, but the team we're with are so good that for whatever reason, you are on board no matter what. Does that make sense? So I think culture plays a bigger part than people realise.
Yeah, and I think it is a powerful concept. Here's one for you then, Tracy. Could you walk us through what it actually looks like when that alignment is working?
Yeah, I think the language we would use is that you, on the whole, are showing up in what you classify as your best self. Yeah. So your best self is you're still feeling quite energized, even if you're you're coming out of a challenging day. It can feel like flow at times. So you're in things, you're kind of getting energy from the work that you're doing. All of your natural attributes that are, you know, that rise to the top are coming out, and people can see it. They're probably leaning into your expertise for that reason. You know, so I don't know, I guess as an example of that, one of my top attributes is accountability. So if there's a role where I can take ownership, see the consequences of my decisions and see them through, that's my best self in action. If I'm not able to kind of activate that, then I can feel frustrated. But I guess what we're saying there is that people really feel like when they're showing up and it feels aligned, is that even when things get tough, which they do a lot, you still feel like you can activate everything within your system to do the best job possible and not feel drained by it. I think if there's people out there that are probably listening in right now and there's elements of your job that feels like the change, we're probably going to talk about that because, you know, as the business changes and your role changes, you can feel a shift, and it's whether it's long or short term. But the reality is you feel energized. And actually the hard stuff sometimes gets you more energized, if anything else.
Yeah, I suppose they're getting up for it.
Yes.
When really your day-to-day role hasn't been getting up for it. It's been that a little bit of energy.
Yeah.
But you mentioned your unconscious motivators there. So how do they play a part in the sort of role alignment positively?
Yeah, I think a good way to look at that is that they do line up heavily with your value system.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're fortunate enough to have gone through some psychometrics and kind of like really dug into this, you'll realise, you know, why you get out of bed in the morning and what it is you need to feel good. And it could be something like, for me, strong and self-reliant, for you, needed and appreciated. Yeah. There's a whole lot of factors that sit underneath that. So when I wake up in the morning, I need to feel like I can take accountability, I can make decisions, I can make a difference in the world, I can work alongside other people. These are all big factors in what makes me shine. For you, you've got some of the similar things about working alongside people, but you want to succeed and achieve, and that shows up in different ways, doesn't it? So if you use this, we call it, like, that would be your engine, if you like. Does that make sense? That's how you're running. So your core motivators, it gives you autonomy, variety, but also allows you to dial into the stuff that feels really important to you. When they're challenged, that's when things shift. So quite often it can be a complete imbalance in values, or that you're not able to tap into those motivators and show up in your best self anymore. And that's when we feel a shift in your role. Yeah,
and I think there's a level of, we can get into communication and how this is communicated and what it looks like out on above the waterline, if you like.
Yeah.
But just before we do that, what happens if we flip it? So if it's now a misalignment, what happens there?
Well, I think the way I'd summarise it, if I'm going to be really scientific, is it feels a bit funky.
Funky?
Yeah.
What a good word.
And the reason I say that is we start to see what we classify as shadow behaviours emerge. We'd probably be triggered more than usual. We might procrastinate. We might feel irritable. We might be disengaged. Our energy levels might drop. We might be going in and doing the job and doing a great job, but when we leave work, we feel like our energy's been zapped more than normal. And it could be because we're dialing into attributes that don't feel natural to us. It could be because the working environment shifted. As an example, you could be working with a great team of people doing a hard job. A couple of people change, not as much humour, not as much energy, you know, that takes its toll on you. It could be something like a change in the role you're doing means different attributes, different skills, learning, unlearning, relearning, and it's all come very thick and fast, and you haven't quite mastered it yet. So it's I guess what it is feeling like something isn't lining up for you, and as a consequence, your behaviours are maybe not showing you in the best light. Your relationships might feel strange. Your communication might not be as clear as it usually is. But a good indicator for me is always energy.
Okay. So if we talk about those sort of specifics that we know of, and without going into too much of the jargon around sort of triggers, what are the things that we can make links to from a role alignment to triggers?
I think what you'll find with, it's the things that you find counterintuitive or frustrating. That's probably the best way to put it. So for some people, they're triggers. So say they're strong and self-reliant like me, and they're forging forwards in life. They're decision makers. They'll take a risk. They'll move with pace. And triggers will come at a cost of working alongside people all of a sudden who are slow to make decisions. Yeah. They don't want to take a risk. They are less likely to like dial into courage and move fast. Slow moving people can be another trigger for some people. It definitely is for me. And as a consequence of that, because it feels so imbalanced for you personally, then those triggers turn into behaviours in most cases. And they're on the whole, that's not a good thing. But I guess the key thing here is how long does it last? Because sometimes this can be short term. So as an example, you could be in a role, there's been a major change, a team reshuffle, whatever that might look like, and your role has changed somewhat. So it might be you've got less work or more work, or you're working in a different way, you're working with a different group. There could be this funky feeling for a little while, and you've got to do your maths on, is it just a short-term thing that I need to adjust to, or is there something bigger in this? Is it challenging my value system, my unconscious motivators, my attributes every single day? In which case, I will continue to feel like this. Now, when we do work as coaches, we'll ask loads of questions around this because it's really good to get right down to the nitty-gritty, isn't it? Yep. To see what it is and what we can control and what we can't control.
So that's fascinating, because what you do is you then get into the like standardized language of how you can communicate these things out, right? So if it was someone listening who was wondering about their own situation, how can they check this and do it themselves?
Well, this is actually a really good thing to check on yourself. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have things like a psychometric tool that kind of tells you how, what gives you an indication as to what gives you most energy. So something like print. On the back of our print profiling tool, there is actually a role alignment piece, and it's written all around your unconscious motivators. I think it's the one thing on our print profiles that's the least used and the most useful.
Yeah, definitely.
I talk to people all the time and say every quarter just have a check-in on this, because even if one thing scores low, the chances are it could be giving you a funky feeling, in which case that gives you an opportunity to go and have a conversation with someone. Yeah. Is it something you can control? Yes or no? If yes, then you go have the conversation. If no, you've got to put some type of trigger management, or you've got to have a strong word with yourself about how you're going to deal with that, right? You can't let it go on. But you don't have to have psychometrics to check that out. I think if you're someone who's grounded in self-awareness and you've got an understanding of your value system, what's important to you, what your non-negotiables are, there's 3 things you can do. So the first thing is an energy check. Okay. So at the end of most of your work days, do you feel energized or drained? Now, there is a difference between tired and drained.
Right.
Okay.
Go on then, give us the detail.
So you can feel tired as a consequence of being energized. Does that make sense? If you've had such a good day and you're walking away going, I am knackered, but oh my goodness, what a day I've had. I've done X, Y, Z. Yeah. Right. That's different. That's a good feeling, right? If you're walking away feeling drained, and it's not about productivity, sometimes it links with productivity, because you can think, my to-do list just got bigger and bigger and bigger today, and I was procrastinating, or I was off kale, didn't feel great. But drained to me is it's linked with not enjoying the situation that you're in, and maybe that is feeling that you're not in control of it, or you're doing a lot of stuff that's tedious to you. Does that make sense? And those things do feel different, because you can feel, I hate that expression, a good tired, but you can. It's like, I feel good busy. Yeah, there's not a good busy, but you know what I mean. Done. Yeah, got a bit done. Yeah. I can walk away on most days and go, right, I've had my dopamine hit several times. I've still got a massive to-do list, but I feel good about it. Does that make sense? If I'm going home at night and I'm drained, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 when you're fully drained, your battery is empty, you need to fully plug in to even think about. And another thing there would be, it would kind of line in with the Sunday night scaries, wouldn't it? So if you're feeling drained, you've had the weekend off. Yeah. Most of us on a Friday are good knackered. But when we start to realise on a Sunday we're going back in on a Monday,
and that list is massive,
and that list is still big, are you still feeling the consequences of that drainage from last week?
Yeah, maybe.
Second thing is strengths check. Okay, so am I regularly using the strengths that I feel are more natural to me? So as an example, if you've done your attributes report or even your print report with us, there'll be things that jump out that are really important to you. You're naturally good at it. Creativity is one, isn't it? We get a lot of people who are high in creativity, high in decisiveness, high in accountability. I'm trying to think of lots of, cunning's another word. Yeah. You can tap in and think of new ways of doing things.
Or discernment.
Discernment, yeah. Am I able to go through the process of thinking things through with people and doing that? If I'm doing that a lot, then it's probably a link with my energy levels being quite good. If I'm not being able to tap into them, I'm going to feel frustrated. Here's even worse though, if you are not just tapping into your stuff that's natural to you, but you're having to really dig deep and go into the stuff that isn't good for you. So if I went to the bottom of my attributes, so for something like patience, if I have to wait a lot, that's quite frustrating for me. But I don't know, for some people, they might be lower down. They might be lower down in some of the decision-making ones. They might be lower down in stuff that kind of involves tapping into emotional awareness and things like that. And a lot of the workplace sort of scenarios they're in at the minute, it's very draining from a human capital perspective, in which case they're not just not using the strengths that are there, they're actually going into the stuff that doesn't feel as natural to them. So there's a bit of a link between both of those things. And then the third one, which I think is the most important, is your shadow check. Okay. And that is, am I noticing more shadow behaviors in myself lately? So think of the things that you know you do, okay, as a consequence of frustration. So that could be linked to triggers if you're aware of those, but it could just be those little traits that you have when you know you are, I don't know, frustrated, tired, run down. You know, it could be a lack of patience, could be avoidance, could be frustration. If you feel those creeping in more often than not, then the chances are again that something is not right within your role alignment. So it's 3 things to check. That's all it is.
So those 3, just for everybody, you got your energy check,
your strengths check, and your shadow check.
Cool. Okay. So you mentioned, just for everybody listening, the sort of timings of things.
Yeah.
So, and how often people should be checking in with these different. I think you mentioned monthly. But is that the only sort of thing you'd be advising other people to be doing?
I think for me, I always recommend like a very light check on a monthly basis, particularly if you feel, just go to the energy check first. If you can feel that feeling off, then I would check it as often as you want to, but monthly as a minimum. But I think if you want to get really deep into understand things and it feels like there's been stuff that's been ongoing for a while, I would recommend a light check on a monthly basis and a deep dive on a quarterly basis. And I would probably put something in if there's any significant shift in your role whatsoever. Don't forget that can be in a manner of different things because the business is moving fast. One team member could leave your team and that would affect
it affects
you.
the dynamic, doesn't it?
Your working hours could change, your boss could change, your responsibilities could change. Anytime something like that shifts, it can be good to be preemptive and go, okay, so now I look at my role alignment and what's important to me, what's going to change that's going to frustrate me? Or when you've been in it a while, okay, what have I found that's frustrated me? And you know what? I'd also say use that as a tool for going into your one-to-ones. So I always recommend leaders and managers who have got access to tools such as we do with role alignment on there for each individual to use that as a talking point. But I'd also throw it back at the individuals now and say, think about those things that you can now link with that lack of alignment in some shape or form and have a discussion with your manager in your one-to-one. So come off the bit of paper, the ticky box thing, and just be real about actually what you're feeling and what could make your situation easier.
Yeah, and I think that leads on quite nicely to one of the things I just wanted to ask about around these role alignments, and if you have the ability to complete one, they're not static.
No.
The obviously you've mentioned a couple of variables that happens within teams.
Yeah.
But if it was the perfect role was there, or the perfect role is there in the future, things some way, shape or form, things will have to change. So what can be the perfect role, and then how can businesses change, Tracy?
Well, I guess that's the, you know, it happens constantly, doesn't it? Your business is shifting all the time. So as I alluded to there, someone in your team could change. The whole business could change and go 360, 180, depending on what, you know, the vision and strategy is. New owners,
yeah.
Anything, you know, a change management program, something as stupid as a new system being put in, you know, all these things are variables that mean that day to day you're going to have to put up with an element of adaptability. But think of it like a football team. It's a changing game, isn't it? So you can have the perfect striker who loves scoring goals, but all of a sudden the team strategy is to be ultra defensive for next season.
Yeah.
And you're not as important anymore, or the way that you do things has to fundamentally change. You're not doing exactly as you always have, which has put you in a good mindset. So you might have the right skills, but the game you've signed up for has changed. Now, this is an interesting thing to think about, because this is something I come against a lot when I'm coaching individuals. So I was with a creative marketing role coachee a few weeks ago, brilliant at innovation, brand building, and that's the job that person went into. But the business had to pivot to just focus purely on operational efficiency. So it was like less creativity, more process. The role we decided as within a coaching sort of arrangement didn't really align with our core attributes of creativity and vision. And this was causing this individual a lot of stress because, you know, and I'll be honest, this person was saying to me, you know, I shouldn't feel this way because I'm in the best job in terms of salary I've ever been in.
Yeah.
I've got a supportive environment. I have great team members. I have opportunities to be creative in other ways, but it's not the job that I came into. So why am I feeling so frustrated? And going back to this football game, she was the striker. She was the striker. She was the person that thought she was going to come in and score the goals, and all of a sudden had to essentially go on to the bench. Now, one of the things that made us think about that was, how important is it to understand where you are and recognise whether it's long or short term? Does that make sense? Or are you going to be on the bench a long time? Are you going to try another position on the field? Or is this something you can't control?
Yeah, so if we was to be quite succinct with what that person, or what, as you've been through that process with someone, what does that person do? Because we've got whether they're going to be on, is it going to be long or short term, but is there anything else we might need to consider?
Yeah, so this is where I guess looking at the role alignment allows you to make a brave decision, doesn't it? You've got to really sit in it and think, adapt. So can you find energy in this new role, right? Can you learn to leverage different attributes to fit the new needs of the team? Okay, now this could be a powerful thing to ask yourself, because there is a downside to feeling comfortable and only working with your strengths, right? Which is you're not leveraging anything else. So you've got no idea about your latent potential sometimes. So sometimes you're throwing a curveball, to use the sporting pun again, for a reason. Like, you think, okay, well, I've never had to do X, Y, Z, or work with this person or work in this way. What can I leverage now to see if I can make that more enjoyable, more energizing, all the rest of it? And if there's some reality in that, then that's development, isn't it? Yeah. The second thing is, do I just weather the change? Because if it's short term, if it's short term, stick it out, knowing the game will probably change back. Now, we do have situations like this in businesses, don't we? Where we go, this is short term pain for long term gain. And the reality is, I can see the end. I just need to get through this period. I need to step in and, I don't know, cover a colleague, or I need to do something differently. And if that's the case, then you've got to stick it out. And then the third thing, and this is a tough decision, move on.
Yeah. Now, that's not failure, though, is it?
No.
And if you think about it, if you've informed yourself to a level of understanding your role alignment and actually gone into that detail, then it's actually a strategic move, isn't it?
It is, because I think if there's too many things don't line up for you, so let's just say none of your attributes are going to be accessed. Fundamentally, there's something that your value system doesn't line up with. As I've met with plenty of people who the way that the business is running has completely gone against their value system, and for that reason, there's no holds barred. They have to make a decision to move. Sometimes it's just recognising that this team are playing a different sport now, and you need to go find somewhere else who will be looking for a star striker in your area, in your role, if that makes sense. And that's not failure. That's realising that you might have reached your point, if you like, or your ceiling within that particular role or that environment. And it's not necessarily about the job. It's about the opportunities, as we said earlier, and the shifts in the ways of working and all those things. So it's a brave decision to make, but it's sometimes a decision people do have to make.
Yeah. And I think it has been incredibly insightful for us to really think about, well, what are the conversations and what are some of the key takeaways for me? That role alignment and that dynamic it's about the whole person. It's not just about how you see this one situation in this one guise or one lens, if you like. They have the power to check themselves. Mm-hmm. And again, they're not static. So these things will change. Your feelings will change. Is there something personally that may impact professionally?
Definitely, yeah.
But I think, any final thoughts for our listeners from you, Tracy?
Yeah, I think that we've got to remember that, you've got to be self-aware enough to recognise, your own role alignment, if you like, in terms of how you're feeling about things. Going back to the 3 things that we said to check in on earlier. But as a team, to make sure you've got the best chance of winning, everyone needs to be playing in a relatively good position that feels right for them to remain in best self. It's highly unlikely that every single person in a team is going to be operating, in their best self all the time. Of course, there's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be changes to your role alignment, etc. But I guess what we've got to understand as humans is that this game is fluid.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have to expect a little bit of a change. And that sometimes means having sort of open conversations with your teammates, your manager, the people around you, to understand what's the game we're playing. And I guess that's maybe one of the tips I'd actually give leaders is, are you actually communicating with clarity the game you're actually playing? You know, because we come across this all the time. We make some assumptions in our roles in an organisation that we're playing a part. Yeah. We're not necessarily connecting with the bigger cogs, the organisational kind of outputs and what the team and the individual goals look like for us. So for me, you've got to connect the message to the individual with, you know, potentially the role alignment piece there. You know, this is the difference you can make. This is how you can do that. And I think for me that the biggest thing is self-awareness. You've got to make that your greatest tool. If something, I know I simplified it a lot earlier by saying if something feels funky, but that's the truth, isn't it? If something doesn't feel quite right to you and you can't quite explain it, that's normally a sign that you need to do a little check-in on yourself. Yeah. And what I would say there is understanding your own attributes, your motivators, the non-negotiables for you is really important, because then you can make that link with what's challenging them. There's loads of cool tools out there, and we've got loads of stuff on T2 Hub that can help you. But one of the ones that I like to connect with is something called the Wheel of Work. You'll have probably seen the Wheel of Life, but there is actually one called the Wheel of Work, and we do have it on the T2 Hub. And it's a very, very simple process of going through all of these areas and kind of shading it in to see how bumpy your ride is in terms of the wheel. I think even something as simple as that, just going through that process, can really open up great conversations, so that you feel fulfilled. If you feel fulfilled, the chances are that you're going to be more open, more transparent, more communicative with other team members. And it means that you're able to have a really good narrative with your line manager too. So for me, you're going to get ahead of some of those problems. So it's a really, really powerful thing to check yourself on.
It's powerful advice, Tracy. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I think for everybody that's listening and everybody's watching, obviously hit us up on the socials for LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you want to find us. But thank you for joining us on the T2 People Performance Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Tracy.
The People Performance Podcast, brought to you by T2.